Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Natalia, CEO at Codility. I have a privilege to host a fantastic group of panelists today. We all are here because we care about building high-performing engineering teams. This is a super broad topic, but we decided actually because of joint experience of all the panelists to go into three main themes around high-performing engineering teams. So we will talk about diversity and inclusion and how to hire very diverse teams to start with. We will talk about working remotely. That's a very up-to-date topic amidst the coronavirus situation globally right now. So we'll talk about remote working and remote hiring, and we'll also talk about teams development, and career paths. So I'm very excited to hear about your experience. A little bit of housekeeping for the audience and for our webinar participants. We are using GoToWebinar during this webinar. So you are able to ask questions anytime throughout the webinar. We'll be serving the questions to the panelists throughout and by the end of the webinar. So if you have a question, if anything resonates with you, you would like to share feedback or questions, please go to the question tab in your GoToWebinar webinar app, and let's go. So the webinar will take up to 1 hour, and we can start. So my first question to all the panelists is if you could please introduce yourself, tell what you currently do, what is your company doing, and also in your current role, what are you most proud of so far? Something that you've done in your current role for the current company that makes you proud.
Yeah, I can start. Hi guys, I'm Preety Carr. I am a VP Engineering at Carta, located here in San Francisco. Carta is formerly eShares. We are in the private equity management software company, also supporting investors and looking into getting our openings into LLCs and stuff like that. As one of the VPs of engineering here, I think the thing that I'm one of the things I'm very proud of is we have fairly distributed teams. We have offices all across the US, Canada, Australia, and also in Brazil, Rio. And I think just because of the nature of this, sometimes distributed teams start feeling a little siloed. And a lot of my engineers are in Rio, so I worked very hard on trying to get that silo broken and worked on getting collaboration and communication channels set up and in good shape. And as I hear to my pleasant feedback I get is that they're feeling a lot more a part of the decision-making process, not just a broadcast that used to happen to them. So it's been a great feeling that I've been able to help them with feeling like a part of the team.
Mm.
Awesome, I can go next. I'm Maksymilian Majer. I'm the CEO at ITCraftship, which is a recruitment agency that specializes in recruiting top tech talent, mostly in the remote space. And we're also building our own HR products that support sourcing of talent. And we're a small startup team currently for 12 remote people and 7 part-time remote people. And this is the work style that we're promoting. As far as what I'm the most proud of is definitely being able to pull talent from all around the world and having employees in Argentina, Nigeria, Slovenia, Romania, the Philippines, and Poland. So also kind of trying to improve the lifestyle of people in many countries that are developing and helping them raise their bar.
Hi, everybody. My name is Amanda Townsend, and I'm the head of Global People Operations at FiveTran. FiveTran is a tech company based in Oakland, California, but we are global, and we help companies build data pipelines. We're in the ETL space. Let's see, something I'm proud of is, well, I started at FiveTran 2 years ago, and we had 60 employees, and now we are at 300 in 8 different countries. And so we've just experienced a ton of growth, and during that growth, we've won lots of awards for our company culture globally, and we have an employee retention rate of 90%. So people are happy and they're staying, and definitely really proud of our team for accomplishing all of that.
So congratulations to you all for that. So it's amazing to hear a common thread already emerging from all of your experiences, which is distributed engineering teams and pretty much working remotely from time to time. So did your company decide to go remotely right now, fully remotely right now for all the employees, particular offices? How are you dealing with this, and how are you helping your team throughout these times?
Yeah, so starting this week, we are fully remote. Just, it felt like a civic duty to help, reduce the R, as they say, on the transmission. So we're doing all that we can and staying home and, trying to stay as productive as possible. And in some ways, I feel like, especially here in the Bay Area, your commutes take up so much time. So maybe you even get a little bit more time to get things done. So what we are doing is, we've offered people to take their big monitors if they wanted to take those home. They're providing a stipend for lunch just so no one feels, the pain of paying for lunch every day while you're working. And also we are just, the usual technology, your Zoom, your made sure all the meetings. We upped our Zoom max number of people that can join a meeting. And, interviews, in fact, we are doing Carta scaling, we're hiring a lot, so we don't want to slow down there. So that's been a little bit of a challenge. How do you do technical sessions, architecture, whiteboarding stuff? But yeah, technology to the rescue. I guess we're trying to use all those ways and just making sure everyone's getting the support they need from IT and stuff like that.
Yeah, FiveTran has decided it's not mandatory, but we highly encourage employees globally to work from home, especially those with underlying health conditions during this time. We also don't want to slow down our hiring as well, because we have lots and lots of roles open, and so we're trying to do all of our interviews remotely and all of our onboarding for new employees remotely as well. So it's definitely been a change, as I would say 90% of our team does go into the office every day normally, but I think that it's going to be a test of our resilience, and it's been good so far. So we have this policy for another couple of weeks.
Well, at ITCraftship, we started remotely from the beginning. So we were a remote-friendly company from the start. We were running hybrid model. So some of the people work from our office in Warsaw, but have a completely open remote work from home policy, so they can work remotely as much as they want and they need to. And we also try to promote this, and with our clients, kind of convince them that this is a model that can work for them and improve their results. So we educate a lot about that and advise on how we can build up processes that will help you be productive in this model and asynchronously.
And what would be so it sounds like you either already, all of you actually in your companies already tested part of flexible work arrangements for your engineering teams. Also I'm imagining the fact that you have dispersed engineering teams in different locations makes it a must to have a different way of working and syncing between the teams. How would you, for people that are not in that position, and for companies that are working in one location and right now have to quickly adapt to working remotely, any best practices that you could share?
Yeah, I can. I was letting the expert speak. I think I think some tricks that have really worked is, maybe just if people don't have experience, everyone being on a Zoom call or Hangout or whatever they use, just doing a quick training, maybe just to, tell people that, just how etiquette, I guess, a quick etiquette training on how you would do a all remote meeting. And this might be actually a blessing in disguise for some. I feel like you can learn to collaborate with your coworkers without them being in person, and just making sure that coming up with some way that if someone wants to say something, some people just tend to be take over the meeting and say more, versus some are timid and shy people, but they have great ideas as well. So coming up with a group way of how you would make sure that the mic is passed around and not just one person is leading the entire meeting. So I think just things like this, to have an open conversation, address questions, things like that, I think is a good start, at least.
Yeah, a challenge that I've seen very often at companies when they attempt to go remote, at the start, there's usually this bottleneck of not having your knowledge base out there, and like knowledge being constrained within individuals or small teams at the company. So this is something that companies should really look at when they especially are forced into going remote, how we could remove that bottleneck, how we can actually make those like Zoom meetings that you right now need to run remotely. Now, how do you document the outcomes of those meetings? Where do you put them? How do you follow up on those and make sure that everything stays in a place where all the people can find it and are not blocked from being productive by others in the company?
Yeah, I feel that internal communications it's just really, really important when you have remote teams. And just like you were saying, making sure that all of the access to information is, easy to get to. So at FiveTran, we use a tool called Slab. Slab is basically an internal library of documents that you can update in real time. And so all of our policies and processes for the entire company, for all the different departments, are in Slab. So any employee, no matter where they are, can look up how to access something or how to get information.
Yeah. I think one important thing in this is that a lot of companies are facing is onboarding new employees, because I think that's when an engineer trying to set up their entire environment to actually get productive and start contributing. I think that's probably the most challenging right now, and I don't think most companies don't do onboardings remote. So even for us with presence all around the globe, we are still pretty good about our onboarding in an office and stuff. So I think just to say on that, I think exactly what's been covered so far, right? Documenting everything, and it's having we have this buddy system when someone starts that this engineer is going to be your buddy, but I think now is the time to be even more specific about that and making sure that the newcomers have a good person to chat with, and that can help them remotely to set up their environment, which I'm pretty sure is going to be one of the most challenging things right now.
I can imagine, because probably still the majority of companies, even if you are dispersed, the first days are actually in the office, right? For the majority of us, and it's kind of like getting in touch with the company culture, getting in touch with your coworkers, learning how to go around. So how do you make that? How do you or how are you thinking about making that experience for an engineer that is joining you best possible in this new world of going fully remote?
Across the remote teams that I worked with, one thing that worked very well with onboarding was to assign a buddy, basically that a person that would kind of guide you through the things in the company and be the go-to person if you had any questions. It was in a need for support, and that was something that I've seen a few times in my career previously, also as a remote team leader, and later on with our clients who were the most successful with that approach.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's like, just opening up the bandwidth for like the tech leads on teams or people who are senior and have, been around a while at the company and know exactly where the bodies are buried, so to say, so they can have some more bandwidth to help out people who are joining their teams or are, it'll definitely take a little bit longer to kind of get people unblocked. So just trying to get ahead of that, and when you're doing your sprint planning and stuff, just make sure some people have a little bit more bandwidth for firefighting and stuff like that. So those are the kinds of things we're trying to do.
Great. So thank you for sharing that, and actually making a segue to remote hiring. So this, I think, also came very quick for everybody, and a need to go fully remote for hiring. Have you already hired people without seeing them in person ever?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a difference, or how do you make sure that that you get the same quality of signals that you would get in from in-person interviews and in-person meetings?
Yeah, I think that structured hiring is very important, just making sure every candidate across the board, no matter where they are, has the same experience, the same interview experience, I should say. And, I think that with remote hiring, it is important to have the remote candidates speak with, a variety of people from different teams to make sure that their communication is, at the level that you need, and, giving them situational or simulation type interviews to see what they would do in certain scenarios, asking them if they have worked in remote teams before and why they enjoy it, because some people may not have done it before and we'll find out after they start that it's just really not for them. So it's all about asking the right questions and making sure that they speak with enough people at your organization to make a firm decision on whether or not they'll be a fit.
Yeah, I think Amanda basically covered all the steps we try and do is. So we have like a mixture of remote, the level of remote, I guess. Some people I have hired that I've never met, but some other team members meet at like Rio offices, let's say. But yeah, we have definitely, figured out sometimes it's not possible to travel, or there's just no one in that office that's gonna interview them, then there's no point bringing them in. So we've done that, and I think just like Amanda said, you got to have them meet with a variety of people, and just making sure that the signals, I actually think you can still get just as many if you have a conversation with someone, you're just really paying attention. The questions are of different, situational questions, and it's questions where they actually can show their skill versus how they would communicate. And yeah, specifically if they are going to be remote the entire tenure at a company, I think it's so important that what you are indexing for changes a little with a remote employee. Their communication just absolutely has to be really good. They, whereas someone else, you might be okay with them being a part of the team in a in-person setup. There is a difference there. So I think doing a little bit of a briefing before we go into the interview to say that this person's completely remote, and making sure that everyone is looking out for that specific skill set is important. So just coming together as a panel, we do that, and we have those conversations, and set our panelists up properly so they know what are they gauging for.
Yeah, and there is one kind of tip that I can share, that I was inspired by Toggle.com that started hiring based on only skill quite early on is something that they call the trial day or a trial week, which is excellent, especially if you're considering hiring people remotely, and especially if you're considering them to work remotely for a long period of time, meaning that that's going to be your work style in the future. And what they do is they create an environment for the top candidates who perform the best during interviews, doing coding challenges and like pair programming exercises, whatever was part of your process. The final 2 or 3 people are invited to do paid work for like anywhere from 1 to 3 or 5 work days spread across some longer period of time, where you actually try to imitate the environment you have at work. If you're working a lot with Skype and Zoom, then you'd create a channel at Slack and invite that person in with the team they'd be working in with in the future, so you can see how they communicate on Slack, how they exchange the thoughts. Do they over communicate when they're delivering on specific tasks? Do they ask the right questions? Would they utilize Zoom whenever necessary to get the feedback and learn everything they need at the time they need it? So when you simulate your environment like that, you quickly learn how that person works and how will they fit into your environment, which definitely adds a bit of time to the whole process, but also decreases the chance of making a bad hire, especially in a remote setup. So I do recommend adding that overhead.
I actually have a question, Max. What do you guys, so the clients that are working with you, are they also hiring engineering managers, like people who are people managers? Are they also fully remote? How does that? I've been very curious about what are the kinds of tricks or tips do people have on their up their sleeves to hire managers remote?
Yeah, so for remote managers, it's quite harder to actually assess if they're going to be performing well remotely. It's like there's the skills to perform remotely are going to come out a lot later in the process. So I've worked with I think 3 companies only that were at a scale where they had a lot of engineering managers that were remotely or remote tech leads, team leads, and they had more like internal workshops where people could advance into these roles and learn how they can use what they've learned working remotely to manage others, and how to communicate expectations, how to perform assessments so that people improve also in the remote model. So I think it's a bit harder to hire engineering managers strictly remotely, but maybe what we also want to touch on later, how you can help them advance, you can help promote from within the organization to have people these roles.
Okay, and would you actually think so that it's easier to hire a team remotely that is fully remote, or is it easier this way, or is it easier to first work in the office and then gradually become a remote or more, let's say, more flexible team and especially people manager?
I think it's usually easier to start out in person. I mean, you don't always have that option, but sometimes when we hire people who are remote at FiveTran, we'll have them come on site to the office for a week or 2 and meet the team in person, establish those relationships, really understand people's working styles, and then they go back home and they start their fully remote work lifestyle. But, like I said, you don't always have that option. And especially if it's someone who's worked remote before, they may not need all of that. But yeah.
Yeah, we do similar. I think in person, even if you've had that once, the rapport you build with someone is just easier to ask questions, or, it's just the relationship really is so much better. So we do try that. To travel budget, I guess, is what you need, and try to get people together, and when we do come together, my only guidance always is just make sure you do things that you wouldn't be able to do when you're remote, right? And not just if you're sitting in a corner on a desk and just doing your work anyway, and there's no point. So, some of it is also a little bit of a forcing function where I make sure that there is some agenda, something that we are going to do that's going to really benefit from you being in person somewhere. And yeah, starting off usually, for the first 2 weeks, if someone can come in, that's always a great way to start. But yeah, that's not always a possibility. And so I think case by case basis also really depends on the engineer, what they prefer and how they like their work setup. And we just try to make the best of whatever is available.
Yeah, both Preeti and Amanda said that like kicking things off on site is easier and creates a better connection, and I completely agree with that. And it's also more relevant to people who don't have remote working experience, and it's also more relevant for people who have less experience whatsoever. So like people who are earlier in their career, junior people or interns, people that at this stage you really can benefit not only from spending time with people at the beginning, but also just listening and whatever's happening in the office, like people discussing challenges, other engineers discussing problems and solutions, some discussions that you would normally not be able to just accidentally get into if you weren't spending time in the physical office space with other engineers. This is why I don't necessarily think this is the best way to start for everyone. And I've only rarely seen junior people who had enough self-motivation to actually ask questions, go into those conversations with other engineers, not feel ashamed of asking those questions. So this can be kind of a real challenge, and something where on-site work could work better.
So probably what is possible remotely, you actually make it happen so much faster if you have a sort of like a couple of days together in a bootcamp kind of way before you go fully remotely, right?
Yeah.
Got it. I'm also very curious, since we're already in a topic of engineering managers and in general growth with the company. What we discovered throughout our research with engineering community recently is that more than 60% engineers that we asked, they have no idea how to get promoted. How are you thinking about engineering career growth, progression? Also, finally, should everybody want to be an engineering manager at one time? What is your take?
Yeah, that makes me sad, that statistic. I'm super passionate about this. I think as a leader, the number one job we have is to help our engineers grow and get to that level that they want to get to. And I think any leader who doesn't feel passionate about that, it's really sad. But I think there are multiple things that can help with this. And Carta specifically, we have these 2 tracks where there is a IC track. You could go all the way up to a CTO level, never having to manage a single person. Or you could go up the track, I guess, that I'm on, is become a people manager and then thrive in that. So there is absolutely no need for anyone to become a manager if they don't want to progress in their career. So we have very clearly laid out, as much as possible. This is not a solved problem, honestly. Multiple companies, multiple people have tried to define levels and what skill sets you need, because it's people. You cannot put people on a piece of papers. It's always very different. But there are guidelines for managers to know and to do this gap analysis conversation where you can say, hey, you are at this level and this is what is expected of the next level, and in fact the level after. If you aim for the level after, you're already doing the next one, right? So if I'm going to promote you or make a recommendation for your promotion, the check boxes are so much easier if your aim is the one after. So I spend a lot of time, I coach all my managers to spend a lot of time around doing these constant gap analysis conversations, and always, pointing your engineers to, I encourage them, find this 1 or 2 or 3 people that you admire in the company, that you, because there are different things you can admire. So it doesn't have to be one person. So, identify those people and find that gap. between what they do and why they do this so much better than you, and then have an honest conversation with your manager. That should be the person you can confide in and say, this is where I think I'm lacking. Can we try and find more tasks for me that will help me hone on in these skill sets? So there are so many different things you can do, I think, if you really put your mind to it, to help people. There is almost always I'm yet to meet an engineer that didn't want to work hard and want to get ahead. There's usually other reasons why people seem like they're not working hard enough, or of course there are exceptions, but for the most part I think it should be very clear for everyone, how do I get to that next level? So, and I can talk through this until the cows come home. I'll let others talk about it, but yeah, that's kind of how I feel about this.
Yeah, I'm also very passionate about growth, and just to piggyback what Preeti was saying, at FiveTran, we are in the middle of creating a learning and growth environment company-wide, not just in engineering. So what we did recently was we had every single department head create competencies for every single role at the company, including engineering. And we also have an IC and also a manager track. And so we have core competencies for all of our engineers, and everybody knows what their competencies are that they need to meet at their current level and all of the levels above. And then we have two different things at FiveTran, two different ways you can move up. So one is a promotion, which usually happens during a performance review cycle, which we have 2 every year. And then you can also move up through an internal hire. And internal hires, you have to interview for the role above. And usually that just means that you're changing teams or you're changing tracks. So going from an IC to a manager, or even the reverse. But if you're just progressing in your current track, then you don't have to interview, but you do have to make sure that your manager assesses the competencies for that next level. So that's how we manage growth at FiveTran currently. We're trying to create fairness and equity across growth, and just making sure everyone has an equal shot at growth at the company. So that's how we do it currently, and it's working pretty well.
Well, at ITCraftship, we're pretty early in our growth, so we yet have to develop this process. But recently, I interviewed a very interesting head of people ops at a company where, from very early on, they created a framework that focused on 4 different areas: drive, the ability to set goals and think outside of the box, informal leadership, which is collaborating with others and communicating within your team and within the company, then teamwork and how you can share knowledge and contribute to the team growth with your knowledge and with your experience, and then problem solving. And they've created an entire framework around these 4 areas, and at each of their levels, when you progress, they clearly set what kind of skills you need to represent or characteristics you need to represent in all of these areas that are very critical to their culture. So I think it's a pretty good example that I've seen, and it says that as a senior engineer, this is how you should, for instance, around teamwork, support other members earlier on in their career with your knowledge, with your behavior. So basically, if you want to progress and if you want to advance in your career, you actually can look at the other positions in the company, what you should look up to, what kind of characteristics, and then if you show them, you can hope for advancement in your career.
So it sounds like across the board, it's one key thing is having clarity what competencies you need as an individual contributor to progress on your track, and then potentially also to manage people, and also that it's very clear across the board what criteria you assess your people on, right, in certain cycles. So it sounds like you've all built a lot of predictability to your process resources, a lot of clarity for your teams, and then this is probably something that we can recommend to everybody and to all the places where actually engineers aren't necessarily they do not have that clarity. So that's probably where this is coming from. So thank you so much for sharing this. And I'm also very curious about especially what you Amanda mentioned. So you mentioned about building equity for all, so a fair chance for all. So how are you today, all of you, please, thinking about building a high-performing, diverse engineering team? So how do you think about diversity and inclusion? Because I know this is top of mind for many leaders in our industry right now. Any thinking and best practices that you could share from your experience in your places? I would love to ask you about that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to building diverse teams, it really depends on how your recruiting team is sourcing. So where are they sourcing from? Are they just relying on referrals? Do you have structured interviewing? You know, all those different types of things are really important. And, you know, making sure that your sourcing strategy is really targeting underrepresented groups, or whatever your company is defining as underrepresented groups. And actually, I think defining that is like the #1 step, because a lot of companies are not aligned on what underrepresented really means. And so making sure to start there, and that all of your leaders are on board with that definition is very important.
Yeah, I think the first thing is, you have to be intentional about it. You cannot put the burden of fighting this fight on the underrepresented group, because that's the smallest group you have. And oftentimes I find that that's what happens, right? I am a woman of color in the tech industry. Like, I'm minority, no matter how you slice and dice that statistic. And I often find myself trying to lead the charge in a company about that. So at some point I had this epiphany. I was like, well, no, actually it shouldn't just be me, right? There should be people who are who have a lot more influence, maybe even to get these things changing. So at Carta, it's amazing that we are very intentional about it. There are people ops has this as their OKR. So this is, increasing that minority groups representation. So we're very intentional about it. We use tools like Codility, I guess, where, you can anonymize. You don't need to know. We have a committee that comes together, and we try to not, just to avoid bias, we call them the candidate and things like that. And also there's like multiple things we do where I feel like at the beginning, right, at the interview process, we are trying to remove bias as much as possible. And then I think it's also hard to then retain these candidates and keep them happy and engaged. Right, so there are we oftentimes forget about the second side of things. Is once they are here, do you have psychological safety in place? Do they feel the facility that I'm able to express, that I don't feel like, my accent or my location or any one of those things is going to hinder me and make me feel insecure? So there's a lot that needs to go into that as well. And again, at Carta, I think this is one of the places I've seen where a lot of effort is put into by Henry, our CEO, who, if you read his blog post, he talks a lot about first offer, best offer, because negotiations are typically something that underrepresented groups are not going to be great at. Versus people who feel that they will always get out of this in a better position. So there's multiple things that I could go on about, but if you're intentional about it, I think you'll come up with things to do that'll help with this initiative.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to repeat Amanda and Preety a little bit on that. And so when you're hiring, making sure that you're assessing based on skill, and it's kind of the most important, and removing that kind of bias. I'm pretty confident that most people wouldn't want to be hired because they are a minority, but rather based on what skills they represent. But before you can actually assess on skills, and you can use the tools that remove the bias and have a process that tries to avoid bias as much as possible, you actually need to have the people apply from different minority groups. And I think this is a big challenge that companies should focus on. And this is not only in how you you do like your active sourcing, who you're reaching out to, but also how you kind of structure your employer brand, your employer value proposition, showing that you actually and how you care about the culture in the company, how you respect other minorities, what kind of language you're using within your job descriptions, with your job advertisement, within your entire communication. Because if you don't get that right, you're actually not going to have enough talent apply coming from those minorities.
Mm-hmm.
I would also imagine that what you're experiencing can be a virtuous circle, right? So you actually you welcome underrepresented groups to your teams early on, and then you become a more diverse workplace. Therefore, you are a more attractive workplace to underrepresented group further to come to work with you, right? So it's probably way more difficult to start that but not impossible, but probably a little bit more difficult to start that initiatives if you're at 500 people and have never really built that thinking into your hiring process and into the way you work with your people. I would imagine. So how do you? And I think this is a super important point, that it's not necessarily about finding and hiring team members from underrepresented backgrounds, but how do we make sure that they can actually thrive with the company? How do we make sure that they can grow with us, that they stay with us, and that there's no difference in their career progression further on, right? That they're not trapped as, okay, we have underrepresented groups, but they don't progress with us. So how are you thinking about fair chances for everybody in your organizations?
Yeah, I think that performance management, kind of what we were talking about earlier with just growth and making sure that you have a performance management strategy that allows every single person to get consistent, accurate feedback about how they're doing is very important. And I know that a lot of startups struggle with this and often don't have a performance management strategy until often it's too late. And so we had a Black History Month event, actually two, last month for FiveTran, and some of the panelists were discussing things that are attractive to them when they are looking at employers. And a lot of people from minority groups, often, I know one of you mentioned psychological safety. I think that was you, Preety. That they mentioned that, making sure that they feel safe in their working environment that they're in. Number two, that they're compensated fairly and accurately compared to their peers. So making sure that your finance or HR team is looking at compensation and making sure that it is equal across the organization on a regular basis, and doing market adjustments as necessary. And then, another thing is benefits. What does your benefit package look like? Is it really benefiting all of the employees or just selective groups? For example, parents, do you have benefits that are appealing to people who have children or families? Because if you don't, then you're missing out on a whole demographic of people that could really bring a lot of value to your org. So, FiveTran just did a whole overhaul of our benefits in the last couple of years in order to address some of those issues.
Yeah, I think those are all great things, right? It's diversity isn't always what your eyes can see. It can be so many different things. Like I mentioned, we have a cultural diversity there. The way they express, or the way they interact, or their sense of urgency, and how a person in New York expresses when they're feeling urgency. It's very different, and it took me a little bit of time to actually understand that difference and kind of try to normalize it. And so you are it's very important that your frontline managers are such a huge, you know, this is where that's where rubber meets the road, right? That's where you have to make sure that they know every team has its own dynamic, and you got to like really spend time to understand that dynamic, and then try and coach your managers to make sure every person on that team is getting what they need, and not just the person who keeps asking for a one-on-one and keep asking, am I there yet? Am I there yet? Like, so you got to balance that out, and good managers should be able to see at a personal level who needs what from you. So that's, I think, a very important part in this entire keeping people happy once they join. And also, yeah, I think Amanda beautifully covered most of the things that I think about and try to put in place. There has to be an intentional process put in place for everyone. Policies, you know, flexible work environment. This is something we talked about a lot, actually. I'm a single mom myself, got to pick up my son at 5. Like, it cannot not leave at 5, otherwise he's going to be sitting, you know, where's mom? So that's the kind of balance that, and inclusion is a big part of that. Like, don't just set up last minute happy hour that a person like me can never go to, but I do want to interact with my team. So, and it's every level. It's not even about, you know, a person in leadership like myself can also feel these things, right? So, but I feel like I have more agency to make a change versus a newcomer. But you have to like think about the entire group. Like, you can't just focus on any one. Okay, the interns, you can't just think about that. You have to like think about it at every level. So yeah, I think there's so many good things. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, speaking of good books and everything written out there, Kim Scott from Radical Candor, she said something one time which I really resonated with me, that it's also important that you make your manager comfortable to give you the same kind of candid feedback that they would give to someone else. Otherwise, you're missing out on some good feedback that could really help you. And by you, I mean if you're a part of the diverse group or underrepresented group where people maybe feel a little bit more cautious of saying what they want to say to you. So it's a responsibility sits with us as well.
Since I don't have a lot of experience with retaining diversity within our team just yet, I wanted to ask a question to the other panelists.
And just before you go, Max, a reminder to our audience, to our attendees, that we're very shortly going to Q&A, so that's time to post questions to the panel as well.
So I'm going to start with the first question. Actually, Amanda, you said something about equality, especially around salaries within minority groups and all the other peers. So I was curious what all of you think about open salary policies. Have you seen companies where that's helped increase increase equality and inclusion? If you have any experience with that.
Yeah, FiveTran doesn't currently do this. I have seen other companies do it. I think as long as your organization is mature enough to open up salaries, then go for it. I think that it can have a lot of different effects. It can be detrimental, or it can really help. I would think that before you share all of the salaries with the employees, that you make sure that your current salaries are where they need to be, or else you'll create some issues.
Yeah, I think it's the same. We don't have that. I've actually never worked at a company where they had open salaries, but bands, you know, the information you can, if you're curious, you can ask your HR BP and they could tell you, like, you know, where in the band, where is the band, where you are on the band and stuff like that. Just so, and the employees gain the trust of the employees, that they do feel like you are placing people in the right bands, and that exceptions are not being made, and that they are only, you know, really everyone's being paid same, stuff like that. So even without opening out everyone's salaries, I think there's so many other things that can be done to gain that confidence from the employees at a company.
So I have a similar question here, and this is something that I'm personally also for years I was very interested in how do we overcome salary gaps, gender salary gap, ethnicity salary gap, country of origin salary gap, etc. So one of the things that that I think as leaders we have as in our toolbox is external and internal fairness, right? So how are you without even maybe displaying everything openly? That's a very extreme measure. Some companies decide to go that way. So how are you thinking about internal fairness, also given something that you mentioned, which is that people from underrepresented backgrounds might find it more difficult to negotiate their salaries themselves, right? Because of general the dynamics between coming from a minority background.
Yeah, so at FiveTran, we, like I mentioned, we have performance reviews twice a year, every February and every August. And what we do is, well, we recently launched something called a promotion application, where employees who feel they are ready for a promotion can apply and show that they have the competencies of the next level through this pretty in-depth form. But in addition to that, we also give every department head a merit increase budget and we send all of the leaders basically where all of their employees who are eligible for a merit increase or a raise, what their bands are, where they lie within that band, and then we give them a budget to basically give to their team based on performance. And so we also make sure that we don't need to do any market adjustments for anyone on those teams, looking at where they are in those bands, and sometimes we'll adjust bands accordingly. But that's how we handle that. We make sure at least twice a year that everyone's compensation is reviewed and adjusted as needed.
Yeah, I think very similar at Carta. So People Ops does their part, and I think the kind of thing Amanda mentioned, on our side as engineering leaders, we spend a lot of time. If you are recommending someone for a promotion, then you got to write in that promo packet and get others to chime in and give shout outs and find some GitHub PRs that you think this person shows the skill set of this person, or multiple other things, right? We have a proper template that everyone fills out. So that takes away a little bit of the manager bias, where you really have to. So the engineering leadership team would actually, in fact, entire R&D looks at these promotion packets. And even if I don't know the person, because as the company scale, that's one problem you have, is like, I'm not going to know everyone. Just by reading that promo packet, I should be able to judge if this person feels ready or doesn't. And then, we do a bit of a consensus. So, that includes a lot of people. That panel itself becomes pretty diverse, which is what you want. Outside of, what you encouraging employees to talk to their managers and coaching managers to talk to their employees, all of that stuff that you can do. But at some point, you have to also normalize if someone writes better promo packets, then that shouldn't be the reason their ICs get promoted more, right? So there is I think there's a hurdle at every point, and there is no perfect answer to this, but you got to keep trying all these different things and learn from them and take feedback from people who are actually affected by this, which are the ICs, and then make changes based on that. So it's a constant effort. You got to just keep, and I think it's so important to keep that transparent. You need to let your employees know that all this is going on behind the scenes, that no one just goes and wakes up in the morning and says, yeah, okay, let's promote this person. So there's a proper process in place. So those are the kinds of things I think we can do to educate the employees as well.
And I would imagine that employees' trust in the fairness and thoughtfulness of the process would actually make them feel more psychologically safe as well, right? Because they know that they don't need to, that kind of like the system will take care of them in a fair manner, and they don't need to necessarily fight for themselves more than because they wouldn't be heard or seen.
Yep, 100%. That's the intention for sure.
Thank you for sharing that. So we have some questions. So we have 6 minutes until the end of our panel. So let's take we'll take 2 questions. So one question is around pretty much building engineering teams is a joint process, right? Between engineering leaders and between people operations or HR functions or talent acquisition functions. So how do you partner best with your counterparts in the respective organization?
Yeah, I
Well,
think.
it is okay.
Sorry,
Go
go ahead,
on.
Matt.
No. Okay. Well, this is a problem that we have to solve on a daily basis, especially when we're doing recruitment for engineering teams that are not working within our organization, and this is very often the case in our company. And for that purpose, you usually have to have a pretty well organized process of gathering the requirements from the engineering teams, setting their goals, setting the specific skills and competencies that are required for them to reach their goals, and identifying what the person at the right position needs to do on a daily basis. If you have a process that helps you determine that, with your engineering team, have the right questions to ask, has the right forms to ask, then you can actually prep the process that will meet their requirements and help you deliver better talent as a recruiting team to your engineering managers. I also like, one of the things that I really recommend doing within those kind of discovery sessions with your engineering team is not only to have a structure around this process, but also try to document it as best as possible, even do like recording of the sessions, as we often do, being a remote company, doing those over like Zoom calls or GoToMeeting or whatever tools you're using. We try to record those sessions so that the people participating in the process can actually get up to speed with what's needed, and provide them also great feedback and great value to the candidates along the process, so that they know how they can align to the organization and the needs of the team.
He said it all. So I think I can take up the follow-up question which I'm reading here. I think the best way the question is, how do you optimize the engineering time in the recruiting process? And I think the kinds of things we've done, it's so important that engineering is 100% involved and understands the importance of recruiting, first of all. It's not a favor that you're doing to the company. You're trying to build your own team out. You want to be involved in who your teammate is going to be. So having that kind of conversation, and then what we do at Carta is we have a matrix of who can do which interview session, and then we have some shadow list of people who are on shadow, might be new or newer to a level, and we try to do those. We do reverse shadows to make sure that we're performing at that standardized level. And then the recruiting coordinators make sure that they balance out the load, so they have a list of engineers that can be put on a certain interview session, and then interviewers have full ability to come chat with their manager and say, I'm feeling a little overloaded, the sprint's a bit too busy for me, and then we kind of like talk to. So it's a constant give and take. And initially what I was going to say was, for something like this to work, really Amanda and I would have to be like best friends at work. So because it's a constant conversation between the two departments of where it's a group effort and it's not any one person's responsibility.
Agreed.
Okay, so I think lastly, so as we're closing the panel, one thing that among what the structural shift that is happening in the world right now with the virus and precautions that many people are having, one thing that you would advise everybody, or one thing to remember in the context of building high performing engineering teams, what would that be?
Well, wash your hands and don't touch your face. That's one. Outside of that, I think, what I have told my engineers and all is, keep an eye on productivity. Don't let that drop. Let's make sure we say more, over communicate, document more, update those Jira tickets. Just keep, before you leave, if you're taking the day off, make sure you're even more careful now that there's someone taking over if you're on call and stuff like that. Just over communicate, basically.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just
I think you can.
Oh, sorry.
Continue, Amanda, please.
I was just going to say, yeah, keep communication very clear, keep expectations very clear. And also just remember to treat your teams like human beings and check in with them, ask them how they're doing. This is a stressful time for people all across the world, and just make sure that your teams are healthy and ask them what you can do for them.
Yeah, and I think that we can also advise to utilize technology right now where it can really help, and the technology can help you kind of avoid contact with like large crowds. You can maybe even introduce programs that will help people, get delivery instead of, going like to big shopping malls or participating in like big events and stuff like that. Where technology can help, we should try and use it to our advance and help stop
In
this.
a way, we're lucky because we have so many tools already that we can use and to adapt quickly. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the panelists. Thank you for sharing all your experience with us today. Thank you for going also deep into your practical, tactical suggestions for our audience. Thank you so much, everybody, also for attending. And that's it for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. It was a pleasure to speak with all of you.